Hello, everybody. I'm Pam Thomas, the coordinator for the Northern Virginia and DC chapter of CHAD, and I want to welcome you to our November lecture, Transitioning from High School to College for Students with ADHD, Planning, Preparation, and Placement, with our speakers Liz Cooper and Joan Wittan, standing in for Jen Hamilton from the College Consulting
Collaborative.
Yes, somebody just popped something on my screen and I'm trying not to get distracted. This happens every now these days. AI is popping up, approve this and that. So I'm so sorry. But yes, from the College Consulting Collective in the Maryland area. So our Northern Virginia DC chapter of CHAD is a volunteer organization of trained professionals who offer support to the ADHD community by providing free monthly lectures like this one and offering support groups for parents and adults. And we are going to be hosting 2 paneled lectures in January in lieu of our annual ADHD resource fair in October to highlight ADHD Awareness Month. And I'd like to now introduce our speakers. Liz Cooper is an independent educational consultant who guides students with learning differences in college planning, preparation, and placement. Liz has served as the chairperson of the IECA LD-ND committee and serves annually as a faculty for the IECA's training programs. Joan Wittan is a founding member of the College Consulting Collaborative that helps students with ADHD and other learning differences prepare for and find the right fit college. Joan loves the challenge of building on students' strengths to maximize their potential. And through her years of service to the GTLD network, Montgomery County Public Schools, the Barker Foundation Adoption Agency, and the Montgomery County Business Roundtable on Education, she's gained expertise in working with twice exceptional and neurodivergent students, education policies, assistive technology, workforce preparation, and adoption. She previously served on the board of directors for the Independent Educational Consultants Association, and she also serves on the faculty at IECA's Summer Training Institute. So with that in mind, I will turn it over to our lecture speakers tonight. Welcome.
Thank you, Pam.
Thank you so much, Pam. Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'm Liz Cooper. Thank you for that lovely introduction. My colleague Joan Wittan and I are principals at the College Consulting Collaborative, or the CCC for short. There are 6 of us. We're across the country, and we all work exclusively with college-bound students with learning differences, most notably ADHD. So each of us comes to our work from another career. I'm a formerly practicing attorney, and Joan has a master's degree in education and a professional background in education as well. But importantly, each of us at the CCC came to our work because at least one of our own children has learning differences. So Joan and I are both professional members of IECA, and we each hold the specialty designation for working with students with learning differences. We've both also held leadership positions at IECA, including serving as a chair of the IECA Learning Differences Neurodiversity Committee, and Joan has also served on the IECA board. But together, we're proud that we've collectively trained hundreds of educational consultants on the special considerations and best practices in working with these students. So our work at the CCC focuses on college planning, preparation, and placement for students with learning differences. But today we're going to focus on and highlight the special considerations that students with ADHD face in their transition to college. So we visualize this process as a bridge building. So let me explain. That is, we focus on building the infrastructure and the stability for the on-ramp to provide gradual, stable support before the bridge leaves land and crosses the water. This is a really important and sometimes overlooked aspect of college planning, as students and parents are often laser focused on the opposite shore. So by initiating and planning the preparation as early and robustly as possible, we're actually enhancing the likelihood of a strong foundation and a smooth passage. So thanks so much to all of you for being here today and joining us in bridge building. By the end of our presentation, we hope you will have gained a broader understanding of the transition to college, considerations for college readiness, and some tools to support your child's independence building to foster their growth. We'll also address how to evaluate college supports and post-secondary programs, as well as alternative post-secondary pathways. So please put your questions in the chat, and we'll be sure to answer them at the end of the presentation. So why is college planning different for students with ADHD? Well, we're speaking today about learning differences generally. We're focusing our discussion on the special considerations for students with ADHD and executive functioning challenges. College planning for students with learning differences is fundamentally the same for all other students. We talk about colleges in terms of things like size and location and sports and Greek life and majors and internships, special programs, learning environment, and so much more. But do you remember that old adage about Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire? So Ginger Rogers did everything that Fred Astaire did, but she did it backwards and in high heels. Our students do everything that their peers do, but with additional complexities, challenges, and considerations. Unfortunately, for most students with ADHD, simply providing accommodations for extra time or hiring an executive function coach isn't sufficient. ADHD is a complex constellation of persistent problems, mainly centered on non-preferred, boring, repetitive tasks and activities. In other words, school. So ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder that begins in childhood and often continues into college and even adulthood. Importantly, the challenges and disorganization of ADHD are not volitional, despite students' sometimes erratic performance. Yes, students with ADHD can sometimes, with interest or urgency, perform at very high levels, but at other times, completing work can be an intense struggle. Because most executive functions that control planning, executing, and monitoring activities continue to improve with maturity, delaying college can be a useful strategy. However, some people mistakenly believe that their child will outgrow their ADHD. So while it's true that the prefrontal cortex continues to evolve beyond early predictions and sometimes even into the 30s, the idea that these aspects and areas of the brain impacted by ADHD don't ever fully develop in all people is a serious consideration. So simply put, we believe that everyone progresses on their own timeline, and the endpoint of the development of the prefrontal cortex is unknowable. So you all here as parents are the experts by now. So you know that what works for one person with ADHD may not be particularly helpful to another. You may also have recognized that strategies that helped last year or even last week may no longer be effective. Because people with ADHD seek novelty, strategies must be targeted and they must be flexible and they must be ever-changing. And importantly, students must buy in to the idea and be willing to take ownership in order to achieve success. As we just mentioned, there are verifiable differences in brain development for students with neurobiological conditions like ADHD that result in unpredictable growth trajectories. However, we can never forget that we are still working with teenagers. Joan and I love this visual. Do you see down there that tiny yellow spot in the very back bottom of the brain labeled memory for chores and homework? Okay, now good. Try adding college planning, essays, and applications to that teeny tiny space. You've likely already seen that your child's ADHD has some far-reaching consequences besides a messy room and perhaps a chaotic backpack. Research shows these three things. 1, the impact of a learning difference often goes beyond the narrow skills of reading, writing, and math. And number 2, learning differences like ADHD can interfere with higher level skills like organization, time management, abstract reasoning, short or long-term memory, or working memory and attention. And number 3, learning differences are about much more than a student's performance in school. They can also affect an individual's life in terms of relationships with friends or family, and often affect these individuals in other settings, including in the workforce. So naturally, college planning for students with ADHD must take into account many variables. The challenge is that many students who come to see us are focused on the dream of attending a large university in a warm climate with great football, right? Well, we like to thank TikTok for that. So the CCC approach that we have been refining over the past 20 years involves 3 steps: planning, preparation, and placement. So what you're going to hear tonight is that much or even most of what we do, and certainly the most important part, is in the planning and preparation stages before we even start to think about placement. In other words, we work really hard with our students in high school to help them prepare to be successful in college. Remember, you're building the foundation for that bridge that we mentioned. Many parents of students with learning differences believe that identifying which college or university offers the right support is the goal. You'll soon understand why this approach isn't always successful. So planning involves helping the student understand what is important for college admissions. We won't go into detail in this section as you're probably familiar with most of this information. This is a list of the factors prioritized by colleges and reevaluated by our professional organization every 2 or 3 years. We'll touch on a few of these now. The first 2 factors, rigor and grades. This comprises the transcript. Students should challenge themselves as much as possible while maintaining decent grades and having a balanced life. Also, don't give up if students are off to a slow start. Many colleges, especially those that review students holistically, will look at a student on an upward trend with a good explanation. Students also need to understand that the choices they make with their free time play a critical role in college admissions. While it can be harder for students with ADHD to spend time on routine extracurriculars because their schoolwork often takes them more time, we can help them harness their special interests and encourage projects or activities that emphasize their curiosity and initiative. Our students have developed businesses acquiring and reselling clothing, rebuilt old cars, learned to make documentary films, program robots to serve or to solve a Rubik's Cube. We even had a student design and build a roller coaster in his backyard that actually launched him into a lake. That is a true story. So many of our students appreciate the invitation to pursue their interests, and these types of pursuits can be more effective than rote participation in a school club or expensive pay-to-play activities. These types of activities show character, values, initiative, curiosity, and most importantly, help students explore their areas of genuine interest. As a bonus, they often provide the inspiration for a fantastic college essay. The need for standardized testing is a constantly changing landscape. Students who can earn a high score should make that effort. Students who can tolerate testing should get the right type of test prep for them and earn the highest score they can without undue stress. Having a score might be required for some colleges that they wish to attend, and a low score can sometimes be explained on the college application. We are convinced that preparation is the most critical yet underappreciated factor in college planning. College is not simply 13th grade. Most of our students move seamlessly from 3rd to 4th grade or 9th to 10th and expect the same for college. However, to thrive in college, the student must understand the ways that high school is different from college, how the education law changes, and be prepared to act fairly independently in a different and demanding environment. We believe there are 6 essential skills for college where we want to see growth and competence. Students don't have to achieve perfection in them all, but they should be aware of these areas and have mastered basic skills. Many parents mistakenly believe that students magically develop all the skills over the summer after high school graduation, if only it were that easy. Instead, we strongly recommend that as early as possible, you help your student realistically evaluate how they stand on each of these factors. Get help if necessary. Sometimes an outside tutor, executive function coach, or therapist can be helpful to work with a teen who can no longer hear what a parent says. We are going to run through these skills now one by one. As we go through these skills, we'll try to share practical suggestions, but please keep these thoughts in mind.
Okay, it may seem obvious, but we're going to start with academics. So Liz, I hope, has convinced you of the need for planning and preparation before we jump to the college list and placement. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about what are these skills that we need our students to see. So academics is obvious, but you can see here that we're not just going to focus on the report card. We know that grades are important, but it's really the more invisible academic skills that students don't get grades for that we want to focus on, like writing, studying, and note-taking. I'm going to start with writing because it is difficult for many students with ADHD. Developmentally, though, it is one of the last academic skills to be achieved because it requires everything else, the planning, the organization, sustained effort, this type of things. Also, in many schools, writing is not explicitly taught after middle school because think that they've taught it. And if students aren't ready to learn or pay attention, they can miss out on this foundational instruction. And as a result, many of the high school students we see need writing remediation because they didn't adequately learn it the first time. And students with executive function challenges struggle because of the sometimes boring and repetitive nature of the task. Remember, Liz mentioned unpreferred tasks. Many don't have yet the patience to read and revise repetitively, especially if it is something they're not interested in. And we know for most students, this can be unpleasant. For students with ADHD, sometimes this looks painful, really physically painful or nearly impossible. And as parents, I know that some of you have seen this. Studying is often confused with simply reviewing and rereading notes. And when we really dig in with our students about this, we find that many of them mistake familiarity with the material with deep learning. So we know that our students must learn to study actively. They need to preview the material that they will be looking at in class. They need to engage by taking notes and asking questions in class. And then they need to review and revise their notes immediately after class that day, hopefully, so that they can really understand what they're studying every day. In college, it's too much material. They can't cram before a midterm or a final. We tell our students if they can teach us or someone else what they know, then they really know the material. So note-taking is another big problem because if students lose the train of thought, lose attention, get lost in a lecture, they can't understand the rest. When students are taking notes from text, they tend to highlight everything too much or too little. And they're not actively synthesizing or really learning and understanding the material. Their eyes went on every word on the page, but sometimes they get to the end and we say, did you understand what you read? And, no, they don't. We recommend that students try out some assistive technology for note-taking, a live scribe pen. We like CocoNotes we've had success with, but there's tons of other assistive technology for note-taking so that students can review their materials well after class or listen back to the parts that they missed, backfill their notes, and ask further questions. And of course, being that we're talking about preparation and planning, we really love for students to try some of these things out in high school before they get to college, before they hit campus. The next essential skill, and these are two really big ones, academic skills and then executive functioning. These are really heavy hitters. There are many different ways of explaining and defining executive functioning, but there are critical skills: planning, organizing, activating to work, shifting attention, self-monitoring, reflecting on something that's happened, and self-regulating action. That's a lot. And for students, let me see, now I got to figure out how to back up. Let's try this. Okay, so for students, you know what, I could have left it there, but for students with ADHD, their executive functioning development often lags their neurotypical peers. And in some cases, it just doesn't fully develop the way that we expected. And these are the types of things we keep an eye on. Parents, teachers, and students need to understand how executive function works, which of the areas are challenges for an individual student, because we know it varies, and be willing to try new strategies to overcome these difficulties. And we're always learning. Liz and I recently attended a half-day professional seminar with ADHD expert Kelly Pickens of Undivided Attention. And we learned more about how students with executive functioning challenges can be so singularly interest-driven. And of course, when we learn these things, we're thinking, now, how do we use this for college? And that they are sort of stuck in the now. They're really thinking in the present. So again, how do we use this? Students with executive functioning challenges can't will themselves to become importance-driven. So we could talk to her blue in the face to get students, but this is important. You might need to know anthropology in 2064, whatever. It doesn't work that way. So we want to find tools and strategies to use to play to the students' interests and strengths, because they are not importance driven. They are not intrinsically motivated, many of them, or particularly future oriented. We know these students can succeed, but to succeed, we like to tap into their interests and build a supportive environment that includes things that are fun, novel, challenging, urgent, and praiseworthy. These are the types of things that Kelly was explaining keep students with ADHD more engaged. When outsiders blame our students for their executive function failures, it really makes students less able to perform and tackle difficult tasks. And they can internalize shame, which is something that we feel strongly shouldn't happen. So we do look at the Thomas Brown model, and I'm going to share it with you for just a second because we think that it illustrates the complexity of ADHD. There are many great models, but we find sometimes when we show teachers or someone who doesn't understand the components, when it looks this way, they understand that they can't just say, come on, focus harder. That is simply not going to be helpful. And as you all know, ADHD and executive dysfunctions are neurobiological disorders. They impact control. Even that first one, difficulty with activating, just the act of a student with ADHD getting started, it is biochemical. It is not a student acting out. It is not volitional, and it is no more pleasant for the student than it is for anyone else. So this realization, we think, can help change other people's mindsets. We also are going to throw a link in the chat for this 30-minute video, since we're talking about Dr. Brown. It's an excellent presentation and would be a good review for anyone who is interested. The next skill is independence. It is one of the really critical, essential skills, and it often is overlooked because we are so focused on getting our students through middle school, through high school, doing as well as possible. But we want to really shift focus to helping them become independent young adults. So it's a broad catch-all category, but it builds on academic independence, that first kind of independence, being able to start a task, revise, get feedback, and actually listen to it, finish something and turn it in. But it also includes all of the tasks of daily living, such as doing laundry, showering, taking medications, using public transportation to get around, communicating with both peers and adults, managing money. So we ask a lot of questions as we work with students in ways that we think can be fun and productive. But we will ask, who wakes you up in the morning? How do you remember to take your medication? That gives us some good answers. Who keeps your schedule? So we ask in ways to try to really elicit what's going on. And you can see why we're talking to you parents as well. This is part of your job to let go of some of that. As we gather this information, it's the basis for an action plan. This can be developed with students and parents, somewhat with us, But if there's a lot of work to be done, we're going to refer you to some of the fantastic experts in our area and here in Chad who can do a comprehensive transition assessment or offer coaching to develop these skills gradually. And you heard, Liz, that one of our slides was about dress rehearsal. We really use those words with students. We want them to start nobody has told them they have to get ready for college. They think they graduate high school and it's simply the next step. So we want them to really focus on that concept. If this is dress rehearsal, I'm practicing for college because we want to motivate them to gain the independent skills they'll need for college and really beyond as well. Here's a handout that it's a pretty common approach, but we've developed this for our families at the CCC. And we're sharing it with you. You can access a copy with this presentation. It's very flexible. It's one of our favorites. We use it to educate parents, and also we use it to review with students, but it is not a checklist to put on your refrigerator and march through. There are many independence skills here. You can't do them all at once, but it's a guide to use over time. Oh yeah, we're going to have to learn how to recognize stress and find a way to relax. That's not something we just want to say the day before heading off to college. Again, that idea of practicing. Students do not have to be 100% proficient with each of these, but we believe that with intention and planning, and hopefully your students are young enough that you have a little bit of time, students can make progress on many, if not all of these, and many is good for high school. And then when we're getting closer to college, we're looking at what exact supports will be needed, but we'll talk about placement in a little bit. You're looking at the first half, but we will give you a complete copy of that. And then independence, before I leave it, this image really says it all. Our teens cannot develop independence without parental support. And that sounds like an oxymoron because what we actually mean is parents doing less and sometimes a lot less. And as parents, Liz and I explained, we each have at least one of our own children who had ADHD, and we understand this. We've lived it. It is one of the hardest parts of parenting a teen, especially one with ADHD. But standing back instead of stepping in to help students is something to think about and to practice. Parents need to prioritize allowing and even encouraging our students to develop the ability to speak, think, and act for themselves without input or prompting. Because honestly, the way we see it, if a student can't do a task without prompting, they can't yet do the task independently, and that's what we're looking for. So we do a lot of public speaking. I can't see all your faces, and I wish I could, but what we say to parents is this: don't just do something, stand there. And usually we see some smiles, and I hope you're smiling too, because you get it and you know it's going to be hard. But let me remind you that we don't want the first time students need to use any of these skills to be when they're away in college. We want them to have opportunities in high school to practice, to fail a little bit, to pick themselves up and try again. And here's a cartoon that sort of sums up this independence, and it's Jeremy and Zitz that we really love. And very briefly, I hope you can read it. If I found your social security card, thanks, Mom. It'd be a good idea to have it memorized, and Jeremy agrees, and he shows it to Mom. You memorize it. And she, of course, says, I meant for you to memorize it. Oh, okay, that's another way to go, I guess. So we wish you many of these moments, and that your Jeremy will be able to then take that card and say, okay, my job. Another essential skill for college is self-determination, and it's one that doesn't get as much attention. But students should learn and have some support to set personal and long-term goals as they're looking to college. We know that long-term planning is hard, and that's why we say they need to learn and have some support to do this. Because students with ADHD, remember, struggle with future orientation. They're really living in the now, but They need to have strategies to self-monitor and make adjustments as well as advocate for themselves, because these are the essential skills for getting things done. And in college, there are differences between high school and college. Students are fully in charge. There's no special ed teacher or case manager looking out for them, and they must accept and understand their own strengths and challenges. They need to have a grip on the changes in disability law to know these changes. And they need to understand their college graduation requirements. So think about that. They need to arrive at college knowing things that are their responsibility. And what we know is that getting to self-determination is a step along this spectrum of developing a sense of self as a student. So I'm going to break it down just quickly a little bit more. We start with self-awareness because students need to understand their strengths and challenges in order to articulate what they need. Occasionally we get parents who say, but don't use the term ADHD, or don't use the term learning difference, and then we know we can't work together if we can't convince them that it's really important. Students need to be self-aware, and then they have to keep moving. They need to begin to accept themselves. And I'm not a psychologist, but I know this is a process that can take some time, and especially in students.
A lot of niggas that tried to play like shit was chicken ass on my cousin grade died on my 19 times, Joe shots, all type of shit, all type of fucked up. Poof, for real, no bullshit. So that niggas want to keep playing like this shit a game.
There we go. Thank you. Okay, so we're getting them to accept who they are. It can be tough. It can take a little bit longer, but we want them to start to really understand what wonderful and unique, capable students that they are. And that leads to then being able to say, I need more time to review, or I work more slowly, and so this is what I need. These steps lead to that self-determination. Here's where I'm going, and that ability to make plans. So how to do this? We like to suggest that you, the parents, ask the professional who performed your story.
Ride fast, track on, going to gas, you know we got away. We ain't playing with niggas, I gotta get close, I cannot miss. Okay, go to nose.
So we recommend that you get in touch with the professional who did your student's neuropsych or psychoed evaluation to explain your student's learning profile to them. This is a meeting for your student in a positive and understandable way to help them better understand how they learn best, what they're great at, and how to grow in their areas of challenge. And we have found that students listen really much better from that type of expert who is not their parent. There's sort of this mom and dad deafness that happens in high school to all students. We also encourage students to attend and speak up at their IEP or accommodations meeting. It's another place for parents to sit back and watch their student go and grow. Advocating for themselves in high school will well prepare them for college, where they simply must do the same thing on their own. And finally, self-determination as the culmination of all of these steps allows students to understand how their brains work, and they'll be able to persist after setbacks, problem solve, and make those adjustments to reach their long-term goals. Another essential skills we're going to talk about is social emotional competence, because appropriate social skills and emotional control are also critical components of college readiness. College students need to be able to communicate appropriately and effectively with both peers and adults. Students need to be able to manage their frustrations and emotional states, and that's hard for students, some students with ADHD. They need to make independent decisions, anticipating, analyzing, and balancing the consequences. And these are just some of the social emotional skills necessary for navigating college and, frankly, life after college. Parents are alarmed sometimes when we mention that in the college dorm, the person in charge is often barely older than the students. and that resident advisors, RAs, will not help students manage things like screen time, sleep time, or study time. So our students need to get practice. They need to be able to self-regulate and self-manage all aspects of their schedule. They'll need to live with, communicate effectively with, and negotiate all sorts of things with a roommate that they've never met before. And that's why we're going to recommend tonight that you help your student build independence and coping skills as early as possible by spending time away from home over the summer while in high school, of course, with whatever level of support is appropriate. But we want students to have experiences, preferably even on college campuses, so that when you drop your student off for freshman year, it is not the first time the student is living away from home without you all. If your student is seeing a therapist or coach, we like to think of care in a continuum with no sharp stop points. The stop point is not the week before college begins. Support can overlap, support can later fade, but it should be relatively uninterrupted and familiar. So to help set your student up for a successful transition to college, we always recommend that they begin with more support than they think they need, because they don't think they need much. So we convince them we're going to put everything in place that makes sense. And then over time, you're going to be the one to evaluate what is most helpful and then shed whatever support you don't need. And most of them really accept that. It's a useful technique. Motivation and resilience together are the next steps because they build on that social emotional competence. And then this is something that we were talking about that let them stumble a little bit. Motivation and resilience emphasize self-autonomy and the ability to persist through obstacles. And we truly believe that the most successful college students are not necessarily the smartest, but the ones who know what they want and what they need to accomplish and get it done. So all students are going to face obstacles in college, but those who succeed are the ones who are able to consistently and continually move forward. And we can help our students gain these skills. We are big believers that as parents, we can be helpful when we allow our students to take small, safe stumbles, learn to problem solve, and keep going. In fact, we want those small failures to happen at home where there is support available if and when needed and asked for. Practice at rebounding from mistakes makes a resilient, independent, and self-motivated student. And if you want to learn more about this, we recommend you read. There's lots of great stuff out there. We love, of course, The Self-Driven Child by Bill Stixrud and Ned Johnson, and we can share information on that later as well. I'm going to turn it back to the attorney here to talk about the laws.
Thanks, Joan. And I did just drop that link in the chat if you want the reference to the book Joan just mentioned. So because I'm an attorney, I will start with the laws, but please bear with me. This is very important information for parents and students to understand. Okay, so here we go. In 1975, Congress passed the Education of Handicapped Children Act that focused on special education and removing barriers in public school. This act later became the Individual with Disabilities Education Act, known as the IDEA. The IDEA ensures that students ages 3 to 21 will receive a free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. So this means that the IDEA ensures that children with disabilities have the same opportunities and access to public education as their peers without disabilities. To understand this better, we're going to focus now on some of the specific language of that law. Okay, to ensure that all children with disabilities have available to them a free and appropriate education that emphasizes special education and related services to meet their unique needs, to improve educational results for children with disabilities, to assess and ensure the effectiveness of efforts to educate them. So this is an education law, and I'm sure you can hear that it is all about identifying student needs, providing appropriate remediation, and measuring success and progress regularly. That is, the IDEA is meant to ensure student success. Well, 30 years ago, Congress separately passed anti-discrimination legislation, the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA, and Section 504 of the 1973 Rehabilitation Act. The purpose of the ADA and Section 504 is to eliminate discrimination against individuals with disabilities in any program or activity receiving federal funding or financial assistance. So these anti-discrimination laws are important, but they are not at all the same as the IDA. And it's because it's actually what's not in these laws. That's what most impacts college planning and placement for students with ADHD and other learning differences. So let's listen carefully to that language again. Here are the important words from the IDEA that are missing from the anti-discrimination laws that relate to college students with learning differences. Free. Accommodations are free. And while some services may be free, many are fee-based, especially comprehensive learning support programs and academic and executive functioning. Everyone. College isn't for everyone. Only students who are otherwise qualified are considered in college admissions, although there is sometimes some wiggle room at some colleges regarding certain admissions requirements, such as foreign language. Emphasis on special education is not part of the college experience. To the contrary, colleges are specifically not required to alter the requirements of the curriculum, only to provide access. Services. Only accommodations are required by law. Although a range of services might be offered, there is simply no template provided by the ADA. Every college and university designs their own approach to accommodations and supports for students with learning differences. So because there are no rules, services can range from minimal to comprehensive and everything in between. And finally, to assess and ensure effectiveness. This is simply not applicable after high school graduation. In college, it's sink or swim. So in other words, colleges are not required to evaluate the progress or success of any student or reach out to those with ADHD. So this is why Joan and I and our colleagues put so much emphasis on the planning and preparation aspects of our work. And this is why understanding the law is such a fundamental step to preparing your child for the transition to college. After all, high school is very different from college. So here are just a few of the key changes we suggest families think about to anticipate the skills students may need to strengthen before college. And Joan has just been talking in detail about a lot of those, but we're going to focus right now on the first one. So schedule. Student schedules in high school are something like 35 hours a week of class and 12 to 15 hours of homework. But in college, this is completely flipped. So when we help our students set up their calendars for college, they get very excited when they see so much free time. But that's before we help them understand that they need to actually schedule things like 1 to 2 hours of study time for each hour of class, as well as time for other things they need to do, like attending professors' office hours, tutoring sessions, and also being sure to leave time for exercising, socializing, and self-care, and calling home. The structure and built-in supervision of daily classes in high school provides guide rails for students. These are unfortunately not present after high school graduation. In college, students need to initiate work and study independently. They likely will no longer have frequent quizzes or assignments, study guides, or daily teacher or parent contact to help keep them up to date on their progress. College students don't really get much feedback about how they're doing until midterms, and that's dangerous. Also, in college, students aren't returning home after school to a structured schedule of activities and homework time and meals and bedtime. So our suggestion is that parents start fading some support over high school in those years to help students become more self-reliant. Here's some examples. parents can allow their students to wake themselves up in the morning, take their medications unprompted. We suggest students learn to fill their pill organizers and, when ready, manage their prescription refills. And students can also learn to manage money and check their balances on their phones. There are many steps like this that students can take to become more independent. So the handout that we mentioned earlier, I believe Joan just mentioned it, the 24 tips for college-bound students, which should have been available to you at this point, addresses many of these topics. We've now spoken about planning and preparation. It's finally time to turn our planning and preparation. It's finally time to turn our attention to placement and to consider the characteristics of colleges and universities that will foster success and meet the expectations of individual students. So we talk about fit, and yes, fit is about the college's location and size and majors and Greek life and sports and clubs and co-ops and so much more. And we do carefully solicit the students' preferences about all of these topics because we know they are so important to them. However, before we begin this part of the conversation, we want to focus on the students' learning style. That is, how do they learn best? For example, many of our students check out during lectures, but can thrive in an active class discussion. This insight informs a choice about the size of the college. So yes to seminar and discussion-based classes, no to enormous lecture halls for these students. Some small classes are often led by professors who are accessible to students, and this can be a bonus to students with ADHD who may have follow-up questions. Also, some of our students prefer a more collaborative, less competitive environment, and one where professors are known for developing relationships with their students. These factors can help our students shine. Finally, many students with ADHD learn best in an experiential, experimental, hands-on learning environment. Labs, field work, academic research, internships, and co-ops, these can all make learning much more enjoyable and relevant. Because if a student cannot be successful at a particular college, none of the other choices matter. So for students with ADHD and other learning differences, we must consider both the available learning support and the learning environment. So we'll start with learning support. As you may know, learning support in college is divided into two general categories: general learning or academic services staff who support all students, as well as accessibility or disability services staff who provide accommodations and assistance to registered students with ADHD and other documented learning differences. General support for all students consists of some combination of these types of offerings: a writing center, tutoring, group study, supplemental instruction, sometimes public speaking or organizational coaching, among others. Learning support for registered students with ADHD or other learning differences focuses primarily on providing accommodations. Once a student has submitted a deposit to their college of choice, they must self-disclose and apply for their accommodations. Additional services may be offered for students with learning differences for free or sometimes a fee. These can include meetings with a learning specialist or peer mentoring, sometimes specialized writing or academic instruction, or even executive function coaching and other options as well. But the starting point is always, what will your student need in terms of accommodations and services in order to be successful? If they've been working through high school to consolidate and improve their skills, it may be more simple than you think. For example, extra time on tests is a standard accommodation available pretty much at every college in the United States, assuming the student's testing is up to date, completed by a professional, and supports this accommodation. Many students, however, may benefit from additional accommodations, such as a distraction-reduced testing environment. That's not always available. So if your student will be bothered by being surrounded by other students chatting and packing up in a classroom while they're trying to use their extra time on an exam, then this could be an important consideration. For students who cannot learn a foreign language and have appropriate documentation to support this, finding a college that either does not require foreign language study as a graduation requirement or that will provide a course substitution, such as American Sign Language or a culture course, could be an important consideration in college placement. Joan and I have seen students whose graduation from college was actually imperiled because they could not succeed in a foreign language, and the college was reluctant to waive the requirement. It may be surprising to hear this, but colleges are not legally required to waive a graduation requirement for students with learning differences. So, we recommend that when you visit colleges after attending the information session and touring the campus, you stop by with your child, with your student, stop by the Office of Accessibility or Disability Services to chat with the learning specialist about the student's general need for accommodations and services. Note this is not the time to bring in a file on the student for review, but more just to gather general information and assess the staff and the space. Some colleges and universities offer transition events or a pre-orientation program to incoming students registered with accessibility or disability services. So when you visit, be sure to ask if the college offers this very helpful service. Okay, for the learning environment, to quickly review. When you visit colleges based on your students' learning style and preferences, consider, are there many large lecture classes, or are there more smaller discussion-based classes for a more intimate learning environment? Are there opportunities for hands-on or experiential learning? And does the college offer the right level, the right amount of academic intensity for your student? For example, is the campus known as a pressure cooker environment? What about the pace of the learning? Is the workload manageable? Does the college offer peer mentors to support the students' transition to college? And what are the social outlets and expectations? Are the professors known for being supportive, helpful, available for students? These are just some of the questions we suggest your student asks. We also recommend your student research specific clubs and activities that align with their interests. We especially appreciate offerings like maker spaces, living and learning communities, affinity groups, pre-orientation, and other programs that will help students find their community. As you've seen by now, there are many options and no one size fits all. This is a very individualized process. We've added considerations of learning support and learning environment to your students' perhaps long list of preferences like academic focus and programs, extracurricular opportunities, and campus culture. But for some students, a traditional four-year college may not be the next step following high school graduation.
Thanks, Liz. So what if that bridge isn't fully completed by high school graduation? Or what if a longer, slower on-ramp is needed? What if a different destination emerges as the student is really preparing and planning? We wanted to just run through quickly some of these alternative pathways for you to think about. Because as Liz just said, a four-year traditional college immediately after high school may or may not be the right option for your teenager. So we sometimes suggest a gap or bridge year to allow the student an extra year to become ready for college. Research shows that students who take gap years tend to develop maturity and skills, earn higher GPAs, are clearer on their career paths, and graduate on time more frequently. That's a lot. And a gap year does not need to be a single experience or an expensive trip. In fact, the best ones are individualized. They engage the student in planning the gap year, and they include maybe a combination of volunteering, working, interning, traveling, taking an enrichment course. So for students who do choose to take a course, we do recommend they do that with the support of an executive function coach so they can use this time to develop college level skills. But students should know to check with the college they will be attending to make sure they're not undermining their eligibility at their college by taking a course elsewhere. And for students interested in a gap year, we strongly suggest that first they apply to their colleges, get admission, and then ask for a deferral for a gap year. You don't always get permission, but usually you do. And when you don't, usually it's a simple reapplying procedure. And there's a lot of guidance. There are wonderful people in our community who give great gap year guidance on building that multi-layered gap year. Another option is called a postgraduate or PG year. These take place at boarding schools, and it offers students an extra year of maturity before starting college. PG years are essentially that 13th grade, but where students also experience living away from home in a dorm, possibly with a roommate, have a chance to learn and practice balancing social life with academics, all with supervision and all sorts of different academic offerings. There are also specialized colleges that can be an option, and contrary to popular belief, there are actually only 2 colleges in the US that are specifically for students with learning differences or neurodiversity or ADHD: Landmark College in Putney, Vermont, and Beacon College in Leesburg, Florida. But both do a great job of tailoring the curriculum and providing the scaffolding and support for students who learn differently to launch them elsewhere. You can earn degrees at both of these places as well. There are also options to attend college, but living in a structured, supported residence for students who need that increased organizational or social support while attending a nearby college or participating in an internship or job. And some of these options include Mansfield Hall, Summit Campus up in Worcester, Mass., College Living Experience, and College Internship Program. Both have multiple programs around the country. So that's another slower on-ramp, but gets students into a college environment. And for some students for whom it isn't the right time or the preferred choice, pursuing a career in an area of interest via an associate's degree or a certificate program or vocational or technical training or apprenticeships are getting more popular. These can be great ways for students to try out different careers and then come back for more training if they need it. And then there are students who are really ready to enter the work field, the workforce after graduation, and they can pursue certificates or college or whatever after. So there's really a range of choices. And of course, the difficulty is figuring out what route your teen will take. And students, we all know, whether they have ADHD or not, they can be pretty enigmatic. But with planning, you're here with the intentionality and learning. We believe we can provide an environment and the encouragement for our students to find their authentic interests, become independent, and prepare to live happy, fulfilling lives. Because it's really, college goes by quickly. It's really that next step that we're looking at. Yes, even with a teenager in tow. So if you can all see the comic, what are your thoughts about college these days, Jeremy? And that's a pretty good answer right there. We're going to end with the idea that success doesn't just happen, it's planned for, and you're all here doing the planning. So now we'll open it up to questions, and I believe someone will help us by asking us questions. Is that correct? And
Yes, I can.
Great.
Yes, I'm Karen, and I
Karen.
can help you. I'm going to read through the questions so that you can answer them, because we have lots of good questions. Thank you. So the first question has to do with talking about challenges for kids who are twice exceptional, who have autism as well as ADHD.
So I'm not sure what the exact question is, but what?
I can do the full question. It says, I have a 17-year-old junior,
Yeah.
And he also meets the criteria for autism.
Yeah.
He's twice exceptional, definitely bright and quirky. Can you please speak to the challenges for 2E kids who have autism and ADHD?
Yeah, so to elaborate on my question if it's confusing. Sorry.
No, I think I have it now, but is there something specific?
Just like a sense of how is more time going to be necessary? It seems like it is with ours, and the independence, I feel like it's more years behind.
Yeah, so we love for our families, first of all, we work with many, many students who sound exactly like your teen, and most of them, develop their skills unevenly, but with good progress. And the trick is to get them as far as they can get in terms of capability, and then do that evaluation of do we have the independent skills for college, and then look at the choices. So we do not work with anyone where we just give them a list. Here are your colleges. We won't do that. It's going to be a plan. And for complicated students, the 2E is a complication, the autism, the ADHD. For our students, we often need those steps built in. So the steps, what you'll want to think about is the idea of working with someone to identify what your team would need to be able to do for different environments. And it may be that the starting environment is a place with residential support. It may be that an extra year is needed. But they're really, I have to say, there are great options. When Liz and I travel the country and we do a lot, we were recently in Boston and we visit colleges and especially those with amazing learning support. We visited not just Curry College and Dean and places that have really comprehensive, great programs, both for learning differences and for neurodiverse teens. We also visited a range of support programs that can meet in different ways, meet the independence and support needs of our students and of your team. Did
So
that help?
That did help. Thank you. And we happen to know Curry College because my kids went to the Montessori school right next to there. It's a lovely campus.
It is. And they've added good services for autistic students.
Yeah, no, I read about it a bit. Thank you.
Yep, sure.
The next question is, do you advise students to disclose or not disclose their ADHD or executive functioning challenges in college application materials?
So the short answer on that is it depends. So we do have students who sometimes want to write their, so when you're applying to college, for those of you who haven't had a child yet go through the application process, there's the main essay or the Common App essay or the personal statement, lots of different names. And sometimes students will want to disclose their learning differences in that essay. We typically, depending, but we typically will encourage our students to use that space to use that as an opportunity to share with colleges things they care about, their values, to give colleges insight into who they are and what they care about. If they want to disclose their learning differences, we talk with them about why. Sometimes there's no reason to disclose it. Their transcript looks good. They've challenged themselves. They've done well in their classes. It's even. There's nothing on the transcript that a college is going to be looking at and trying to understand. It's pretty straightforward. Sometimes there is something that would benefit from an explanation. And when that explanation has to do with the student's learning differences, that is when we would have them disclose it. For example, if a student is late diagnosed with ADHD and the freshman year grades or the freshman and sophomore year grades before the diagnosis were really out of whack with the student's intelligence and their later grades, and they have this tremendous upward trend on their transcript, that could be a great reason to disclose learning differences, to explain to the college, this happened. I had this later diagnosis. I found out that I had ADHD, and these are the things that I did. I learned some tools, some strategies, and look at the student I am now. And so there's a separate space in the application where students can do that. It's a shorter, kind of straight to the point type of explanation. And that can be helpful. Some of our students never, even some of our students who, have tremendous impact from their learning differences, it's not impacting their activities, it's not impacting their grades. And so we're not having them disclose. It's a conversation.
Excellent. Thank you. The next question is, are there certain types, and I feel like you've answered this to a certain extent, but I just want to see if you want to expand on it. Are there certain types of post-secondary schools that tend to do better than others in providing services and other supports for children who need help?
Yes. We'll just go, but it's a valid question because we can't start with A at American University and end up with Xavier and explain the differences. We do visit them. There are books, there are websites. You can do a lot of this research yourself, but there's no template. and you really want to get a sense of the person. You're going to have a gatekeeper. That is not where you want your student. If you want someone who's really more resisting those accommodations or services, that's just not what you want. So you want to do your research, and that's why we also say stop by and get a sense, the feel for the staff and the learning center itself. It should be a happy place. It should be a busy place. They should be happy to meet you. And you would want to talk about the key accommodations or services you're looking for. So you're going to start with the website. If it's easy to find the information, if it seems clear, that's also a bonus. That means they care about that. But every college is different, even within a state system. So it's just going to be up to you to figure out. But again, what does your student need? And then what's the Venn diagram match? Who has the services?
Excellent. The next question is, so when kids are clearly intellectually ready for the stimulation, but still have a few years behind on the independent side, how do you decide what comes next? Do schools allow kids to apply, get accepted, and defer for 1 to 2 years? Determining this in a transparent way with the schools as opposed to wrangling for a couple months prior to starting. The problem is that the high school supports and peers moving in the same direction makes the whole college application process less of a drag. We're seeing that now with my 19-year-old who is totally off track.
Yeah, so I think the clear piece that I can share here is that we do advise that our students in their senior year of high school, that they have a full college process, that they're looking at colleges and they're applying to colleges, and they choose the college that they want to attend, even if everybody knows, including the student, that the student will be taking a gap year. And the reason for that is that the system is actually really set up for applying to college when you're in high school. The guidance counselor is there. That's when the colleges are expecting to have students applying. So we'll have students apply, they choose their college, and they then write. It's not guaranteed that you can have a gap year, but they are frequently allowed. They will write to the dean of the admissions dean and request permission to take the gap year. They often need to have a plan and explain what they're going to be accomplishing in that gap year. Sometimes they have to check in with the college a couple of times during the gap year. But transparency is definitely necessary, but not until that point in the process, when the student knows where they're going to be going to college and requests the permission.
Can I add one quick thing to that? Sometimes it's really hard to tell where the student stands on college readiness. And I mentioned before getting a transition assessment. That's something that can be really helpful in pinpointing what the student needs to work on. And then I wanted to also say that besides, we mentioned Landmark and Beacon as two places, they both offer programs where students can participate. At Landmark, it's called Transition at College. Beacon uses different names. And there's a third one, Mercyhurst College has the AIM program. And these are longer term programs where students can go live on a campus, and then parents can actually get feedback on areas of college readiness that need to develop. So that's something to think about.
Yeah, and just to bounce off that, Joan, when students are considering programs like that, that should be done at the same time, concurrently with going through the college application process. So they have their plan come spring of their senior year. They know what they'll be doing in the fall, or sometimes these programs will start over the summer. So it's almost like a parallel search that they're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The next question is, what documentation is needed for foreign language exemptions?
Oh, there's actually no human answer to that because it varies. I know Dr. Salia Namazi's here, and she's getting pretty expert on this. So there is no one answer for that. This is a tricky one. Just know that there are two parts to this. What foreign language does your student need to be admitted to college?
Mm-hmm.
And what is ASL admissible if that's what your student has done? And then what foreign language will your student need to graduate from college? And there's a whole state system, the UNC system. You cannot graduate without foreign language. And to me, it's discriminatory and horrible, but you heard Liz explain the law. They are not required to change their curriculum for students with learning differences. So for students who don't take college, get a waiver in high school, they need a good report. And I will ask Dr. Namazi to speak up if she would like to here. They need a solid report explaining why they cannot learn a foreign language or why it would take away too much from the rest of their studies as a starting point. Sometimes students take a year or two because the first 2 years are pretty easy. They do okay. And then it's almost harder to make that point that they cannot really do a foreign language, but they should have solid testing, but they absolutely must have the conversation first with the disability or accessibility office to make sure they understand the process. And I'll throw another wrench in here. We have had students where we have been told that substitutions can be made. Most colleges don't want to waive the requirement, but they can substitute a college course, or you can take ASL, although not everywhere. ASL is not universally accepted. But it's just difficult. You really need to have those conversations because what many places will say, yep, if you have the right documentation, we'll give it a read and we'll let you know and we're good. Many places say it depends on the documentation, depends on the student, but we have a process. And those are the ones where you've got to be just a little bit cautious and gun shy.
Joan, this is Sally Namazi. I think you answered that really well. I think the evidence is really critical. Really good testing is critical for this.
Yep.
And sometimes we have to appeal, as we've done before.
Yes.
And again, the evidence is critical here.
Do you mean neuropsych testing? What kind of testing do you specifically?
Yeah. Neuropsych or psychoed testing, but neuropsych testing absolutely can delve into this, and the tester can write a compelling reason based on the evidence why foreign language is not going to work for that student. And then one other tip that I'll throw in here is evidence is also, David took foreign language in middle school, and despite us getting him a tutor or took it in ninth grade or whatever, and despite putting hours in, could not be successful. If you have that experience, you really want a teacher or counselor at the high school to have that information so they can add that into their report to strengthen that this was not a lack of effort type of situation.
Okay, no, thank you. All right. Is there a specific subtest or the neuropsych? I mean, because we've had recent neuropsych testing, so then is there something to be specifically asking to get retested in or something to add?
So not all neuropsych testing is created equal. So I would have to know a lot more information about what was done. I don't know if you are able to contact the doctor who did the testing to ask that question. The
Yes, I
Stickford
am.
group also does consultations. So I mean, there's a lot of ways we could go about it.
Okay.
But
thank
it's a
you.
really nuanced. I mean, sometimes we're looking at working memory, sometimes we're looking at reading, language. I mean, it can go in so many directions.
Yeah, I
I'm
guess.
sorry, it's not a simple answer.
No, I understand. And every kid is different. It could be, if they have challenges with written expression or verbal language expression, then that obviously is different.
The next question is, please speak more about the PG year.
Do you want to take that or do you want me to?
Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly what the question is, but a PG year is, in a sense, 13th grade. It's typically at a boarding school. where students are living with supervision in a way that they don't have in college, like a boarding school student would have supervision in a dormitory like college. And it's kind of, in a way, halfway between high school and college, less freedom than college, but more structure as well. It's giving the student an extra year to mature and develop and become more college ready. There are some that have more of a focus for college readiness for students with learning differences that would, have a little more of that focus. And some of them are, prep schools that offer an extra year, and the students will go to those for athletics and things like that. So you need to look at the program and the types of services that are provided. There are some that have some social pragmatics works that can be done. And sometimes students will take courses at a nearby community college with some support. So it's kind of giving them like a little bit of a taste of that independent living with an academic component, but not fully into the complete independence of a college experience. I'm not sure if that answers the question.
I was just wondering, is there an academic component? It sounds like not. It sounds like it's working on other things.
yeah.
Or
Oh, yeah. I'm
is
sorry.
it a challenging academic component?
At some, you can enroll in actual college courses. So you would need to ask. There are some that you would take programming there. Some have SAT, ACT tutoring, but some actually have shuttle buses that take students to a community college or occasionally university. But they come back and there's homework hall or something like that.
The next question is, there was a mention of 24 tips sheet, but they didn't see it. Where can they find it?
So that would be a question for the CHAD organizers. I don't know if that comes out after the session.
We can look into that.
Okay, yeah, so that if there's any trouble with that, let us know and we're happy to resend that. That should be going out to all participants.
Sounds good.
Good.
Let's see. They're asking if the recording will be accessible after the webinar. I'm not sure. I think it's also asking your permission for that as well.
I believe we already gave permission for that. So yeah, we think part of our mission is to share what we know and educate parents. And when we do work with families, our first intake is always about what's best for the student and are we the right people? And if there's someone we think would be better, that's the point of what we do, because we're parents first and then professionals, at least that first meeting. That's it though.
If I can just jump in, yes, materials will be mailed to everybody who is on the registration list, and the video of this recording will go up online in the next couple of days.
Terrific. Thank you, Kathy.
Thanks, Kathy.